Now, there are a handful of engineers turned entrepreneurs in the mobility sector who I deeply admire. My enthusiasm for what they've achieved is propelled not only by their ability to overcome seemingly impossible challenges, whether it's transporting people at 700 miles per hour in a vacuum, going to Mars, or making humans fly. What really encapsulates my interest in people such as Richard Browning is because they're absolutely bonkers. Richard Browning, aka the real life Iron Man, has had an extraordinary journey to date, having had a dream of reimagining a new way of human flight using jetpacks. He went from experimenting with jet turbines in his shed through to setting various Guinness World Records and being inundated with bookings across the world to showcase his invention. You may be one of the 1 billion plus views of his video content online, been a guest at one of his 5 TED Talks, or even had the pleasure of watching him in person at one of their 150 plus flight events from the Maldives to Soho Farmhouse. Today, we're eager to learn what led Richard to become the real life Iron Man and what he thinks of the future of transportation as it plays out in the future. Welcome to the show, Richard. It's great to have you on.
Thanks, Joe. Pleasure.
So I want to kick things off. We would love to learn a little bit more about you and what were the influences, the top 3 influences that in your life that led you to start Gravity Industries?
Yeah, so it's probably helpful if I describe a little bit of background. So I was an oil trader with BP in the City of London for about 16 years. You know, it was kind of an interesting commercial job, doing lots of interesting businessy things. It required you to be quite commercial and creative, but so that was an interesting experience. Alongside that, I scratched a bit of a military itch I had and joined the Royal Marines Reserve for about 6 years or so, which is quite a hard challenge to get your Green Beret alongside a day job. But I like a challenge, and traditionally that was for me a sort of physical challenge. Like I got into ultramarathon running and calisthenics training and things like that. Anything where I'd look at it and think, wow, that looks really cool. I wonder if I could ever do that. And, you know, several years later, I'd sort of get halfway to where I'd imagine I might have been able to get to. Really then, you know, if you put together the passion for pushing boundaries and challenging yourself, but also take a moment, and all of this, by the way, had only come together in the last 5 years of answering many questions on this subject, as it dawned on me that actually my whole family was from the world of aviation and engineering. So one grandfather, Sir Basil Blackwell, used to run Western helicopters. The other one, my other grandfather used to be a wartime aviator and civil aviator, and my late father was a maverick inventor and designer and creator. And actually, to be honest, left a lot of unfulfilled ambition, having died quite early. So in a way, if you put all that into a big melting pot, you can see, you know, a drive, a desire to build and create and make and push boundaries. Flight, I mean, I think it is one of those, you know, perpetual mankind ambitions. You know, it's something that we naturally can't do. We look up at the birds and think, wow, they have a degree of freedom we can only aspire to. And we built lots of great machines to be able to do that. But we've never got very close to being able to actually physically get off the ground and fly, like is very powerfully manifested in science fiction films, which, by the way, I very much appreciate. It was not the driving force behind this. Everybody likes the Iron Man 1 film, particularly because it's such a great sort of maker-builder sort of creative story, but it's not why we built this. But yeah, put all of that together, and that led, you know, 5 years ago to this ambition. Could you augment the human mind and body with the right minimalist technology to actually allow a human being to fly?
Wow. Incredible. Yeah, we're all too familiar with the Iron Man when Tony Stark is in the shed and he's trying to build something from scratch and it's working half the time. Yeah, it resonates with my childhood massively. I share kind of similar passion for all things exploration. My family, all kind of adventurers. One guy was the first man to climb the Matterhorn, the triangular mountain in Zermatt, and another one was Sir Francis Chichester, who sailed around the world on his own in the 70s. This is why this particular podcast was of real interest to me, because I love all things outdoors and exploration. But on the flip side, we all recognize that with the journey of scaling a startup, as an entrepreneur, there's elevated moments and flat on your ass moments, if you pardon the pun. What has been one of your tough startup moments which you've had to propel yourself through, but has made you stronger since?
Well, it was really the startup aspect to it. So I had set up a tech startup from now, it was about 11 years ago, which has been fairly successful and taught me a lot about just how hard it is to take an idea right through the journey towards actually being a successful revenue generating business. So I had some preparation, but with this, I mean, the first challenge, as you can see, you can see it Gravity Industries on YouTube. You can see it take on Gravity on all the social media channels. And as per in the original TED Talk, the first stage was in 2016, taking the concept of could you add just the right amount of horsepower to the human mind and body in a really organic, natural way and fly. By November 2016, I'd managed to do that. But then it dawned on me that was only the beginning, because it's all very well going and doing that, but what do you do with it? I had a real strong hunch there were potential opportunities in the future to build some sort of business out of it. But how would I bridge the gap? How would I use it to generate the funds to accelerate the journey, in the interim? And, actually, I think on reflection, that's been arguably the less glamorous but harder journey. It is essentially commercializing in a robust, fashion that can survive things like COVID, something that's never been invented before. It's not like there's many guidebooks on how to build a jet suit business. So yeah, I'm pretty proud of that, because for the last 4 years, we haven't raised any money at all. There's a very unusual fundraising story some months after we set the company up, but
in a car park, am I right in saying you raised money?
Yeah, the £500,000 in a parking lot in San Francisco on the way to do the first TED Talk. That was the very first flight event, really as a test run before TED. That's TED 2017. And the Drapers, Tim and Adam Draper, wrote a $640,000 check on a $100 bill, gave it to me in the parking lot. So we haven't raised any money since. And I'm proud of that, because it's really nice generating money from client training, doing events, media work, doing military search and rescue things, whatever, having a big portfolio of diverse income streams, which can survive things like COVID coming along, which no one imagined, which also are giving you positive feedback. You're delivering value to somebody. An event or a media outlet are not giving you money just for fun. They're giving you money because you're generating value for them, and therefore that helps you guide your pathway. I think there's a real risk in taking a huge handout from some wealthy individual who might have a ludicrous idea that steers you down the wrong direction. So yeah, it's worked out pretty well.
Awesome. Amazing. Yeah, you've got incredible streams of income from events. I can see you out in the Maldives flying around luxury hotels to conferences and everything in between. It's incredible. I'm yet to come to Goodwood to experiment, but would love to one day. I think you've got a couple of great sponsors. Grenade, Alan Barrett is going to come on the podcast later this year, which I'm looking forward to.
Yeah, I'm impressed with Al. I'm wearing it. Not any brand placement. It's just a really nice top. We know Al, who set up Grenade, and he's got an amazing story which you'll enjoy hearing. And they're a great brand. I mean, they've got a lot of energy and pizzazz, and kindred spirits to us, really. So yeah, that's worked out pretty well.
Excellent. Didn't he give you a Tesla Model X or something like that?
No. Part of it's a bit boring technicalities, but we have a deployment vehicle which is our Tesla X, because you stick a jet suit under the Falcon doors, which is very cool. It's actually brilliant. It actually takes more gear than the Discovery we used to have, bizarrely enough. No, that was part of the sponsorship deal, that we branded a car and we said, oh, let's get that car because that just fits with us really nicely.
Epic. That's awesome. Very, very cool. Well, I think if you're looking forward, obviously you're already forward thinking in terms of transport innovation, but across the wider spectrum, where do you feel transportation is going? There's incredible innovations like Hyperloop, eVTOLs, the flying cars, Lilium is coming to play and eventually commercializing short urban trips for the cost of an Uber. Where do you feel personal transportation is going over the next 20 years?
Yeah, I get asked this a lot. I mean, to be clear, we never set up what we do in Gravity to sort of revolutionize human transport. I mean, it's not really the idea. I would concede that it hopefully is an ingredient into the direction that we go in as, humankind in the next years. But, we're about as practical for going to the shops as a Formula One car. You could do, but it would be a kind of noisy, expensive way of doing it. So the future, I mean, it's really hard to tell. I mean, the society is changing so much with the amount of things you can do online, like me staring at my laptop talking to you. So many things we could have done this a few years ago. We would have done this in a studio and it would have, been the whole day. And it's now everything's so efficient. I want to throw that out there initially, that a lot of the reasons for traveling in the first place might be disappearing or moving, therefore change how we want to travel. And when we do travel, maybe we prioritize the joy of it. I mean, that Tesla you asked me about, We didn't have to buy the 850 horsepower one, but we did. And it's great fun. So when we do have to travel, it's really good fun. So maybe actually fun, and novelty will play a big part in a lot of traveling. A lot of commuting has died by the wayside because of, COVID. People can work from home a lot more. The other big, and this is a boring one I want to throw out there, but it's an unavoidable one, which is, the legislators. We have a very good relationship with the CAA, the FAA, and the military version of the CAA, the MAA, for enough acronyms for the day. Because we are, behind all the excitement you see online, we are very sensible. No one's ever hurt themselves doing what we do. And that's only because we are very sensible with what we do. And there are a lot of interesting, usually multi-rotor flight systems out there, which technically look really interesting, but, are the regulators going to give them permission to fly over buildings, over people, lift people, to great height and regularly between different spots that aren't recognized airfields? And there's a lot of legislation and rules to get through. My hunch is that somebody like China will just pioneer all this stuff. I think they'll spot an opportunity to unclog their congestion that's coming because of all the cars that everybody owns there now. And they will go, right, it's a risk worth taking. We'll go and pioneer this. They will work through all the inevitable, painful learning processes and probably then sell to the rest of the world the outcome, which will be probably extremely reliable little pods that move around, like you say, in a predictive app-like manner, and scuttle people around. But I think it's going to be the legislations and the rules. It's not going to be the technology that slows this down.
Fantastic. Yeah, I think technology is very much on its way, and heaps amount of investment, particularly from billionaires, huge corporations are developing these innovations at great neck speed. I'm particularly excited for Hyperloop, to be frank. I think to be able to get from Birmingham to London in 19 minutes is for me, quite exciting.
So you probably know about it more than me. I mean, I've come across them, before COVID. They would be classically on stage before or after me or whatever. Or all these keynotes, you used to do all these conferences around the world, things like TED. And I get the idea. I get the concept. I just worry about the sheer build cost of I mean, it's crazy enough building a railway line across Australia that they did 100 years ago or whatever. But then you've got to build it in an airtight shed. I mean, an airtight tube, to be clear. But that sounds like a lot of hard work and a lot of investment that is also going to no doubt need a lot of maintenance to make sure it doesn't keep letting air in. I don't know. I'm probably wrong, but that would be my concern. It feels like an awful lot of infrastructure. And if you're regularly shuttling huge numbers of people or materials up and down that, direction, that pathway, then fair enough. But I'd be a little suspicious that on paper it looks great, but just the cost of doing very long distances. But I might be wrong, probably wrong.
All of this transport innovation is super exciting, but actually in the next decade or two, will people really need to travel at all? I think flights, particularly for going abroad, for corporate meetings and so on, is kind of really out of date, particularly with the catalyst effect of the pandemic. People are just doing so online now. So, but nonetheless, people will always need to move, whether it's in the cities or between cities and countries. What do you think of the Boring Company, or more specifically, what do you think of Mr. Elon Musk? I'm sure you may have been asked this one before.
Well, yeah, I mean, yeah. So I've had the pleasure of chatting to him for quite a while at a interesting Miami party that Miami Beach party that we were at. Really interesting guy. I mean, he's fascinating, and his successes, his ludicrous number of successes in industry after industry, speak for themselves. It's no wonder there's a small population of people think he's not human, which I think should be very flattering. Yeah, I mean, phenomenal. I think the world needs more people that have that kind of ambition. He spoke at the same TED as I did, and luckily it was after me, so I could relax then. And he just sat there and did this fireside chat with Chris Anderson, and then was asked by Chris something about, I can't remember what the question was, but the answer was, yes, we're going to go to Mars and we're going to set in place everything we need to be in a multi-planetary species. And he didn't even crack a smile at that point. It was like as obvious and logical to him. Everybody else just kind of whooped and went crazy in the audience, but he was just like, well, no, that's just our objective. Having that kind of ambition makes a lot of other challenges on Earth look a lot easier. So yeah, I think he's phenomenal. I think he's brilliant. I mean, I always say we've got to have as stronger an ethos of innovation as we can in the world, because that underpins everything from new generation businesses that generate tax revenues that pay for all the things the NHS has got to do, for instance, right through to solving how we either live with or wind back climate change. it's just critical. We've got to have more people like him that think different and creative.
Definitely. And there's a number of up and coming disruptors in areas of entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship, people inside companies, and fantastic. And I'm aware you've got some applications with the military and police now. You're doing some work with the Navy. Is that more of a kind of a showcase, or are you actually looking to build something in conjunction with the forces?
So we apply the same curious random walk that we use from an engineering point of view of being curious about building something, trying it and seeing if it works. As long as the act of trying it isn't going to hurt anybody, isn't going to make us run out of money, and isn't going to get us in trouble with anybody, we just crack on and do it and get very used to most of the time it not working. But that kind of ethos is what leads you to, end up running a jet suit business. Part of that, therefore, is not being afraid at all to stepping up when different organizations, like most recently the police and DSTL, stepped up and said, look, what about what you've done with, it was actually the Dutch Special Forces. We did a SWAT team assault thing. You can see that at the Gravity Industries YouTube. They said, well, look, come and demonstrate that kind of concept. And to be clear, the concept is, for some reason, the police need an extreme 1 or 2 kilometers, 3 kilometers degree of mobility in a very built up urban kind of area where all the roads are jammed. You can't run, you can't walk. It's just, imagine the Mumbai terror attacks where they had 20 odd guys with AK-47s running through the town, through the city, shooting people. It's the law enforcement nightmare because the reports of the threats come in lagging where they actually are. So you're constantly chasing around after where the hell they might be, and you can't move. You can't even get helicopters down amongst the streets. You're stuck. Well, not with what we do. So you can break out this gear out the back of a car within seconds and get in the air with the latest system in about 20 seconds, which is kind of ridiculous. And then you can, if you really had to in anger, we've done 85 miles an hour. I wouldn't really recommend that, but you can easily do, keep the maths easy, 60 kilometers an hour. That's pretty fast in any direction. Okay, flying over, parked cars or whatever you need to. Again, you wouldn't do this unless you were saving people's lives, but you could get straight to where the threat is and address that threat. And so we demonstrated that. But yeah, I think more realistically in the short term, particularly maritime assault. So getting special forces on and off ships. We've proven we can do that. There's a great film that's done quite a few million views on YouTube showing what we did with the Royal Marines. And it's because you can just pick a human up and move them in 3-dimensional space and drop them anywhere you like without being dependent on a helicopter. So that's all real. It's all happening. It's slow because big organizations like the military don't exactly just go and overnight immediately adopt something. We're on, we are on target we're in process of actually having that operationalized in the coming, let's say, years.
Really, really exciting. Fantastic.
Oh, it's crazy. And an offshoot of that is the search and rescue work as well, which is search and rescue and military are very similar roles, really. It's probably going to be raining and cold and miserable, and you're going to have imperfect information, and you've got to have the kit work in the dark and whatever. It's all the same sort of requirements. So that's all progressing as well, which is really exciting.
Well, we've got Claire Jones from What 3 Words coming on next week. And just kind of on that note with search and rescue, I think giving that 3x3 meter 3-word location is fantastic. It doesn't need any technology by any means. And I expect that maybe in the future there's some collaboration between you two.
Yeah, we talked with those guys before, actually. We can use any kind of navigational system. In fact, we've got a heads-up system that we're playing with that allows us to kind of forward plot routes up, mountains, for instance. So yeah, I think actually the What 3 Word thing is more useful for the casualty to have, captured or relayed or logged their location. Any information about where the casualty is will be consumed by us and the search and rescue people and then acted on.
Fantastic. I've spent the last few months trying to speak with the bosses at the police to try and get some e-scooters for the patrolling officers. And here you are building jetpacks for search and rescue. But that's awesome. Really, really cool. And exciting seeing public authorities link up with startup innovators. Cool. So here's an interesting question. We try and ask guests this. What has been your favorite journey in your life so far? Why was it your favorite? And what mode of travel did you go by, Richard?
Ooh, that's a difficult one. I think the obvious answer is probably a degree of traveling with a jet suit somewhere. We went to do some filming with Bear Grylls in the middle of COVID in Iceland for Running Wild. It was a big admin hassle because of COVID, but we got there. And then we had some days off, and then me and my support guy just went driving around in one of the team cars and just basically got lost in Iceland. I think we did 6 hours of driving. And we cracked open the jet suit and went flying across the same black lava field where Tom Cruise had done some of the filming for Oblivion. I don't know why that one just moved to mind, but that was quite cool. On the other end of the spectrum, we've done like a 10-day unsupported canoe trip where my two boys were a lot smaller than they are now in the Yukon. That was pretty unusual. So anything between those two extremes, we've done quite a lot.
Wow. And I think you raced Freddie Flintoff on Top Gear recently.
Oh yeah, you could call that a journey. Yeah. So I raced him in one of those Extreme E rally cars. Yeah, that was interesting. That I think highlighted just again how the extreme mobility of what we can do is pretty hard to beat. I mean, we were going, I don't know, below the tree line, up through little pathways, trackways, over frozen lakes, bogs, marshes, fallen trees. You could kind of just go anywhere. And I beat him by about 20 seconds or so. That was unusual. And it was snowing.
Okay, cool. Well, just to finish then, Richard, what message do you have for budding entrepreneurs out there listening who are thinking about starting a business? What do you believe the skills and attributes they should be building at the moment to go out and disrupt an entire industry just as you have?
Well, I mean, resilience is probably the main boring one in that when you sort of sitting there planning, sitting on your sofa, thinking about how your empire is going to grow, list all the things that could go wrong and be very prepared for all of those going wrong, and then a whole load more you didn't even think of. And if you can still survive that, then you're doing all right. It is amazing how hard it is to build something new and from scratch. But what I tend to say when asked this question is really just go back to the sort of core principles of a much overused word, and that is innovation. And the core rules, I sort of touched on them earlier, the core rules that we apply, which I think you can apply whether you're working for a corporate or setting up a startup, is the following, right? Innovation is all about making mistakes and failing. If you're not probably trying very hard or trying anything particularly new. So failure, which corporates hate, and certainly everybody hates, it's no fun failing and having to start again. Set yourself up to be able to be resilient enough to have multiple failures until every now and then you have a success, which is, your sort of catapult catalyst kind of point. So whilst you're busy failing, the rules we apply, I mentioned it earlier, are, if this goes wrong, if this fails, are you going to hurt yourself or anybody else? Are you going to upset the regulators, the police, the authorities, your neighbors? Your reputation is golden, right? And the final one is this experiment going to cost me so much money that if it doesn't work, I can't get back up again financially? If you can survive on those three lenses, to use a horrible word, then crack on and keep failing as quickly as you can and get through all those failures until you get to that success. I used to run a trading book, and it was kind of the same thing in a way in hindsight. You spend a lot of time failing and losing money in the pursuit of the ones that would make you more than those failures. But all the time, you couldn't lose so much that you wouldn't be asked back, or you'd end up, having a hard conversation with the compliance people. I think that's a really important rule set. And anybody, like I say, that's trying to innovate in a big corporate painfully knows how difficult that is.
No, I admire that greatly. I think people shy away from failure. I think making mistakes is absolutely essential. As long as you correct them, learn from them, and develop, I think it's very much part of the process.
You mentioned your relatives, exploring, discovering. I mean, if you're not making mistakes, if you're not going down the wrong pathway and having to backtrack and try somewhere else, but what, have you been there before? Are you following a map? I mean, the whole process of exploration and doing something new is about not getting it perfect. I mean, it's not, you're either supremely idiotically lucky, or it's not new or novel or difficult. And it's such an important message, as I say, particularly in corporate land and any big organization. But startups, you just have to be ready to survive all those setbacks and failures.
Amazing. But on that note, I think that's a great way to end. And I really appreciate your time today, Richard. It was an amazing opportunity finally getting to meet you, speak with you, and hopefully those listening gain some insight and value from this podcast today.